Have you ever wondered how one single moment can destroy everything you've been building for years? Imagine, you come home after a long day at work, tired but satisfied that your family is a fortress where you are welcomed and loved. And then one quick glance at your phone screen changes everything. One message, one stranger's number, and your world crumbles like a house of cards. That's what happened to me. Me, Drake, a simple small-town guy who always did his best for his family. Years ago, Lana and I loved each other to bits. She was the kind of person you'd want to move mountains for. I thought I knew her better than anyone in the world, but fate, it turns out, likes to throw in surprises. Now I, the simple husband who had lived by the rules all my life, was on the verge of real madness. Curiosity got the best of me, and when I looked into her correspondence, my heart stopped. Not from pain, not from anger, but from the feeling that from that moment on, my life would never be the same again. I decided not to make a scene, not to yell, not to ask for an explanation. I chose revenge. And if you think revenge is just a cry of the soul when you've been wronged, believe me, it can be cold-blooded, calculated, and agonizing. Today I'm going to tell you how it really happened. How, over serene family dinners, I worked out my plan. How I appeared to her as a caring husband while my mind matured every step of the way. Welcome to my story, the story of a man who decided that one mistake could destroy not only a marriage but a person.
Thank you for watching my channel. I create videos for your enjoyment. Please subscribe if you want to support my efforts, it's very important to me. I apologize in advance for any mistakes, dubbing is done by neural network. Please point out mistakes in the comments so I can correct them.
The day I saw her phone on the kitchen table, my heart skipped a beat. It started with a simple pop-up on the screen, a smiley face and a couple words from someone with an unfamiliar name. It seemed like nothing, but that was the rock that moved the avalanche. I thought that if I didn't look at it now, I'd just go crazy. What if it was just a mistake? But something in the back of my mind told me it wasn't that simple. When I opened Messenger, I saw a whole feed of messages full of laughter, jokes, compliments, innuendos. My world started to crumble right at that moment. But instead of creating a scandal, I decided to play it differently. I realized that if I acted hastily, I would only lose control. And I wanted more than that. I wanted her betrayal to be the same hell she had prepared for me. Imagine coming home from work and your house is as quiet as the desert. At first you think, well, maybe the wife just went to the kitchen for a cup of tea. But no, when you go into the kitchen, you see her phone, here it is, as on a platter. And then, right in front of your eyes, the screen lights up and a message pops up. It's not a familiar name. Well, I think it could be a colleague at work, maybe a friend who forgot to change the contact. But it's interesting, you know? It's a kind of excitement. And I want to see what's there, but at the same time I think, no, it's better not to meddle. Anything can happen, maybe it's just a small thing. However, when dinner came, something in her behavior changed. She is sitting, staring at her plate, almost does not hear what I say. She answers questions as if reluctantly, and as soon as I talk about something personal, she goes into a deaf defense. Honestly, it's weird. And that weirdness is like a splinter under my skin. You want to believe it's just paranoia, that it's nothing serious. But inside the damn question is already spinning. What if I can't see something? So being the stubborn person that I am, I decide to look at her phone the next day. And what do I find, folks? You're not gonna believe this. I see a dialogue with someone who calls her my sweet secret. And that's where it's no joke. I'm thinking, well, what's our secret? And their compliments, jokes, flirting, and all this so frankly, as if I was spit in the face. You realize it's not just a friendly chat, and they're certainly not talking about recipes. But instead of telling her right away, I decide to think about it for a while. You know, you can always have the classic "are you cheating on me?" scene and so on. But if I think about it, what do I get? I'd only get hurt eyes and probably hear, "You've got it all wrong." And that's where you have to play it subtle. That's when I start to develop my revenge plan. I decide that if my spouse is into playing secrets, I can play it too. Subtlety is key. We're not kids who can't be yelled at and blamed, right? I'm going to start with a hint, so to speak, gently, but in a way that will stick in her mind. So the first thing I'm going to do is decide that there's not going to be any hysterics or scandals. I mean, seriously, how is she better than me if I start screaming and waving my arms around? No, I will do everything like a real gentleman, calmly, judiciously, but so that every word I say to her chills down her spine. The next evening, as if by chance, I start a conversation at dinner. We talk about nothing, I laugh at her jokes, and then suddenly add, I have a colleague here telling me how his wife cheated on him, and he had no idea. Can you imagine? I smile, but I look her straight in the eye. Lana suddenly stops talking, her fork frozen over her plate. Something akin to confusion flickers across her face, but she quickly pulls herself together and pretends not to care. Well, it happens, she says with a shrug. People make mistakes sometimes. Ah, so sometimes make mistakes? That's interesting already. I nod as if in agreement, but I think, well, my dear, we'll see who's making mistakes and who's being coldly calculating. I don't stop there. A couple days later, I remember her secret friend again. I have already memorized his name. Let's conditionally call him Simon, and of course in conversations with my wife I begin to throw references to this name, checking her reaction. For example, over breakfast I'd remark, the funny thing is that all the Simons I've ever known are weird guys. They always have something in their pocket. She tries to pretend she doesn't notice anything, of course, but I can see her tense up, almost frantically stirring her coffee with her spoon. It looks like my hints are starting to hit the mark. And the further I go, the more I feel I'm keeping her in suspense. It's not just suspicion anymore, it's the beginning of a game. Next, I decide to take more explicit steps. For example, I start paying her extra attention, as if to show her that I care, but I do it with a touch of sarcasm. I give her flowers from time to time, compliment her, but in a way that makes her feel like there's a catch. I seem to smile, but that smile says more than words. I tell her once, looking her straight in the eye, Lana, you know what I like about you? You're so mysterious. She smiles, of course, but I can see that she's uncomfortable. It's like she's afraid that at any moment I'm going to say something to her that will make her lose her footing. And it's nice to see her reaction. She doesn't know how much I understand. And the more I see her nervousness, the more I want to go on. That's when our game began. Every night at dinner, I deliberately inserted phrases that would hook her. I once asked her, Lana, do you believe that people can be completely honest with each other? She hesitated, but replied that of course she did. I nodded as if it were a simple conversation, but watched her every move, caught her gaze. Gradually these conversations became a torture for her. She cast suspicious glances more and more often, catching my words and searching for hidden meanings. And I planted these hints in her mind as I watched her anxiety grow. She became nervous, pressing her lips together when I spoke of loyalty or trust. My presence around her was a test, and it only fueled my sense of revenge. And that's where the real game begins. The more I see her nervousness, the more I realize my plan is working. Of course, she has no idea that I know about her correspondence with Simon, but suspicion is like a little splinter that can grow into a wound over time. And all I have to do is twist that splinter a little bit. For example, I start asking her random questions about her day. But I ask them as if I'm doing something, without looking at her directly, so that she relaxes and thinks that the conversation is purely mundane. But every time she answers, I add a little nuance that gives her an electric shock. For example, did you have lunch with your girlfriends or anyone else today? She replies, yes, with my friends. I pretend I didn't hear and casually clarify, well, hopefully with good company. After a couple of such remarks, she starts to notice my subtle hints, although she tries to keep a straight face. This is where she's not just nervous anymore. I can see real fear appear in her eyes. The game is starting to get interesting. Next I decide to go further and monitor her actions. I notice that she regularly goes out on errands, either shopping or out with her friends. But now I make up an excuse for her to stay home every time. Sometimes I just ask her to help with chores or remind her of some errands we have planned. She looks at me like I'm crazy, but she doesn't dare object, because I do it so sweetly, with a smile, as if I mean well. Eventually she becomes afraid to leave her phone unattended. It's always with her, like it's glued to her. And I pretend I don't pay any attention to it at all, only occasionally throwing a casual glance at it as if I just happened to notice it. It's starting to gnaw at her even more. She can't say anything directly, of course, but she feels like a cornered mouse. So one day, when she was going to meet her friends again, I decided to give her a little surprise. I said, I've been thinking. Why don't we go out together? We don't get dates that often. Let's spend the evening together like we used to. She's taken aback, looking like a schoolgirl who's been caught cheating. She tries to get out of it, says she's already promised her friends. And I told her, well, cancel it. Tell her that her husband decided to make you happy and have a romance. I can see her struggling to find the words to say no, but she finally agrees. We spend the evening together, and I do my best to show her what a caring husband I am. I buy her flowers, laugh at her jokes, look her in the eye like I don't suspect anything. But I can see how nervous she is, how she can't relax. And so when the evening comes to an end, we are sitting at home with a cup of tea, and I casually say, you know, I recently dreamed that you have a secret suitor. I say it with a smile, like it's just a joke. But I see her eyes widen and she almost spills her tea. Ah, what a moment, friends. As time went on, I decided to make her feel like she was no longer free even on her own time. Every time she was about to go out, I would make up an excuse for her to stay home. For example, I might say, you know, it's been so long since we've had an evening together, why don't you stay home tonight? She would look at me like I was a stranger, but she couldn't say no. Her attempts to go out for errands became more and more infrequent, and I could see her life beginning to tighten like a noose around her neck. Her nervousness began to show even in the smallest things. She was afraid to leave her phone unattended, but I would sometimes accidentally walk by and glance at the screen as if unintentionally, making her flinch. One day when she was ready to go out, I innocently asked, "Are you going out with a friend or is there someone else coming?" I see her freeze for a moment, almost losing control of herself. One night, already falling asleep, I quietly said to her, "You know, sometimes people make mistakes, and then they can't live with them." She froze, and I felt her breathing quicken. It was a small phrase, but its effect was crushing. It was as if she'd lost sleep, waking up in the night, whispering to herself that everything was okay. Every such phrase was a blow to her nerves. I could feel the urge to confess growing in her, but the fear was stronger. Her confession stayed on the edge until I realized she was on the edge, ready to burst. I didn't stop there, of course. Seeing her eyelid twitch when I hinted at her secrets became almost a sport for me. And every day I find more and more ways to add a little salt to her quiet life. She herself doesn't know what I know about her, but she already realizes that something is wrong. Her intuition, like all women's, tells me there's a storm brewing somewhere. This time I decided to go even further and make a random test. On the weekend, offered to go to her parents to visit, well, as if to spend time together, and about the relatives to show care. She first happily agreed, apparently, deciding that I'm really trying to return the old warm relationship. But on the road, I start talking about the importance of being honest and open with each other. I ask her if we have any loose ends, so to speak, and I throw a quick glance at her face. She's tense but, as always, masterfully pretends it's just another innocent question of mine. "No, it's fine," she says, almost in a shaky voice. "Well, fine," I say, pretending that everything is fine, but I realize there's a whole swirl of emotions hiding underneath her smile. She starts looking out the window, trying not to meet my eyes, and our whole pleasant visit to her parents is spent in tension. I feel that at any moment she could burst like a stretched balloon, but she holds on, withstands my hints, without confessing her little secret. After the trip, of course, she expected everything to go back to normal. But I'm not one to give up halfway through. On the contrary, I decided to add some spice to her life. Now in our apartment, as if by chance, here and there begin to appear little reminders of her secrets. I leave my notes in the hallway with hints of infidelity, pretend to think about family photos. Sometimes I forget to open Messenger on her laptop while she is in the room, as if I am looking for some proof. One evening I sit down next to her, as if for a nice conversation, and begin to tell about an acquaintance who also had a similar situation. His wife had someone on the side. And I add, but he, of course, forgave her. You know, like all those romantics. I honestly don't know if I could do that. I see her flinch and try to hide her concern. And I continue, adding, I think that if a man has let you down like that, forgiving him is like calling the one who betrayed you with another man back into your home. I say this in a tone as if we're discussing some distracted topic. But to her, every word is like a hammer hitting an anvil. She knows I'm not just talking. And it's at times like this that I feel like I'm holding her in my hands. There came a moment when I realized it was okay to deliver the final blow. She was already broken, but I needed to squeeze out a little more. One night I went up to her and said, "You know, I've probably closed my eyes for a long time, but I can't do it anymore. You're hiding something, Lana. And I'm not leaving until you tell me the whole truth." She looked at me like a hunted animal. Her eyes were full of fear, her lips were trembling, and I knew she was about to break. You knew all along?" She whispers, finally opening up. I nodded calmly, without anger. I just watched her last bit of strength drain away, and in that moment I knew revenge succeeded. Now that I feel like I found her weak spot, I'm starting to let go of the leash a little, but in a way that keeps her tense at all times. It's like I'm giving her a chance to think that maybe things have calmed down, that I don't suspect anything. But then as soon as she relaxes, I drop her a little hint again. One evening was a real test for her. We were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, and as if by accident I put my hand on her shoulder, leaned over to her ear and as if in between said, "You know, I read here that sometimes people don't even realize they're destroying things they care about." A pause. She froze, as if she didn't know how to respond. I remained silent, smiling and pretending to be engrossed in the movie, though I could see her gaze wandering for answers. After a few minutes, she took a deep breath and said cautiously, "Is there anything you want to tell me?" Oh friends, how I've been waiting for this moment. But of course, I take my time. I answer calmly, as if it doesn't matter at all. "Well, not really. But if you have something you want to talk about, I'm always open." I say this with such equanimity that she can't stand it and just goes speechless. I can see her inner conflict becoming more and more unbearable for her. She seems to think I've already realized something, but she doesn't know to what extent. And that's the cherry on the cake for me. I add a little more pepper to each subsequent conversation, so that her fear and guilt gradually escalates into paranoia. One day when she decides to go out for business, I throw in a passing question to her, "You're definitely going to meet up with your friend, right? There won't be anyone else." She pauses for a moment, nods, and funnily enough, doesn't know how to answer me. Realizes that any word she says now could be her own trap. And that's when the real show begins. She starts literally tiptoeing, afraid to leave the phone in my presence, tends to leave the room when someone writes to her. And I, in turn, purposely ignore her attempts to hide, letting her think she can still control the situation. The next day, casually, I tell her, "Lana, you know, I've realized one important thing lately. If you truly love someone, you'll never betray them." I cast my gaze into her eyes, see her look away, and realize her fear is growing by the minute. This time, I don't let her leave the room. I ask her straight out, "Look, are we sure we're okay? You seem kind of distant." She quickly changes her expression, tries to smile, but can no longer convince me, or rather herself. "Of course I'm fine," she replies, but there's a nervousness in her voice that she can't hide. All I can do is watch her torment and savor every moment of this game. Now I feel all her walls begin to crumble. My hints and innocent questions have worked. She's like a bird caught in a snare, twitching and flailing but unable to break free. And so, when she's almost on the verge, I decide to increase the pressure, adding a little more fire to the intrigue. This time I choose a particularly vulnerable moment, in the evening, when we've already gone to bed. She turns her back to me, and I ask, as if nothing had happened, "Lana, have you ever wanted to start from scratch?" I ask the question as if I'm talking about something completely innocuous, but I see her shoulders tense. "Why do you ask?" She asks faintly, trying not to give away her excitement. I continue in the same vein, "Well, you know, it's just interesting. Sometimes people make mistakes that are hard to forget, and then they think a new life will fix everything." She goes silent, and the silence between us becomes so thick you could cut it with a knife. I pretend this is all just philosophical musings before bed, but I know every word is like a nail in her head. The next morning, she can barely hide her anxiety. Every step she takes is cautious, every word measured, so as not to accidentally give me more reason to suspect her. I can sense her nervousness, and it only fuels my desire to continue. This time I decide to go for even more direct innuendo. At breakfast, when she's about to run for the door in a hurry to leave for her meeting, I stop her and say, "Lana, have you forgotten that in order for me to trust you, I need to know that I can count on you?" She nods, of course, as if to say she understands, but I can see her lips trembling. "You do know that trust is something that takes years to build and crumbles in seconds, right?" I add, looking her straight in the eye. Her whole look tells me that she wants to leave to hide, but at this point she can't take it anymore, and it's clear to me, she's ready to confess, just to break the stifling silence between us. I walked away, leaving her alone with her shattered life. She couldn't go back to her old life. Her little world full of secrets had crumbled. Word got around town, and I made sure her secrets became public. Parents, friends, co-workers, everyone found out how she was trying to build her other life behind my back. She withdrew, became a stranger even to herself. Every time I heard from people I knew about what was happening to her, I felt a little better. I no longer felt pain, only satisfaction. My revenge was cold-blooded and complete, and now I could move on. I could see that she was on the verge. All her attempts to hide things from me are pathetic and helpless. I can feel her walls finally crumbling with every word I say, and I decide it's time to deliver the final blow. One evening when I get home, I notice that she's glancing nervously at her watch, as if she's waiting for me to leave the room. And then I come up with an idea to play on her anxiety. I walk up to her and say, "You know, I've been thinking that there are times in everyone's life when we all need to come clean, no matter what. Admit to yourself that you've made a mistake. Sometimes we're so afraid that we keep it to ourselves until it's too late." I say this with a completely calm face, as if we're talking about some philosophical truth. She stiffens, her eyes widening, and I can feel her decision hanging in the air. I move closer, leaning close to her ear, and add, "You know, I think I've got it all figured out." Her reaction is priceless. She starts mumbling something, her eyes are running and you can see she's looking for an excuse. But then to heighten the effect, I take a step back and, arms crossed, calmly add, "Maybe there's something you want to tell me? Maybe something I should know about." A pause ensues. She clearly can't contain herself any longer. You knew it all along?" She barely whispers, nearly losing her balance. I pretend to be surprised, raising my eyebrows and nodding slightly, of course. "Did you think I wouldn't notice that you found solace elsewhere? You think I don't care?" Her face flushes, she searches frantically for words, but finds nothing but an apology and a plea for forgiveness. And I finally feel completely satisfied. My plan has succeeded. I look at her with a slight chuckle, savoring the moment. She stands before me broken, like a child who's been caught in the act and doesn't know how to justify herself. She mumbles something about accident, about how she didn't mean to hurt, but I don't even listen to her. I've waited too long for this moment, and now I finally have it in my hands. After waiting for her stream of apologies to dry up, I calmly say, "Lana, you have no idea how much you've disappointed me. All these years I've worked hard for us, and you've been quietly betraying me." She tries to take my hand, but I pull away, letting her know it's over. "You know what the funny thing is?" I add. "I thought you were smarter than that you'd at least be honest when you were backed into a corner. But instead you keep hiding, trying to make excuses." She breaks down into tears, whispering, "Please forgive me, but I don't care about her anymore. My revenge has already begun, and now she's going to feel all the pain I felt when I found out about her betrayal." "Forgiveness?" I repeat, looking into her eyes. "No, Lana, there will be no forgiveness. But you know what will? You're on your own now, and all your secrets will soon be revealed to others. I'll tell your parents, your friends, our mutual acquaintances, let everyone know who you really turned out to be." She begs me to stop, but I remain as cold as ice. My game is over, and now her own hell begins. With those words, I turn around and walk away, leaving her in tears and despair, knowing that her life will never be the same from now on. This story is a reminder to everyone that sometimes a mistake can cost us everything. Honesty and trust is the foundation of any relationship, and if someone decides to destroy it, sooner or later there will be a price to pay. I don't care about Lana anymore. I walked away from this story with a light heart, knowing that I didn't let her break me. And now finally, I can start a new life, a life where I don't look back.